the prisoner of war camp. Yeah, I was laying there in my bunk, waiting to be separated from service, and here come guys walking in, and they were counting the beds and the linens and everything like that, and so in German. So I started counting with them. They heard that and they come back. So we got in a conversation, and and had a good conversation. And so that evening then, when chow time, I walked in the mess hall and they saw me, and immediately they turned around and disappeared. I thought, well, okay, what's the deal? Didn't pay any attention to it. Got me a place and sat down, and here they come. One guy brought a platter. He had a steak on a platter. I bet it was a 36 ounce if it was an ounce. And the other guy was carrying fresh baked bread and butter and milk. And oh man, everybody looked at me. What the hell did you do? And they took care of me. But the reason was they only had their own folks to talk to, but they found somebody, an American, that could talk to them, and we talked about a lot of things. And the interesting thing about it was they didn't want to go back home. They wanted to stay, but I don't know whether they ever did or not. But anyway, so usually when I on a speaking tour, while I open my remark, as I recall, when I got out of prisoner of war camp in Tyler, Texas, and but you get their attention that way, so it goes on. But anyway, my military life was, I think it was one of the better things that happened to me from a discipline standpoint. It was, and I would recommend it to anybody because you get a different perspective on everything. Everything becomes an order, and you develop an orderly life, and so. But I think it contributed a lot to my growth in the business and so on and so forth. Well, I was in the military police. Oh God, yeah. Oh yeah, I know what you're leading up to. I was in the MPs, and they were just building the airport down there, Fort Worth Army Airfield, which is now Carswell. And they put me on guard duty. Now, there's no place in the world darker and colder than an airport. And of course, we had no lights yet to monitor everything. So I was guarding the entry gate on the southwest end. And I mean, blacker than anything you ever saw. And I had a 12-gauge shotgun with 2 shells, riot loads, double barrel. And here come a car. And so I jumped out, got out there and called halt. And he kept coming, so I called halt again. And he kept coming, so I cranked it down. And he stopped. So anyway, I didn't know who I was going to shoot first, the guy with the driver or the dog. So anyway, he said sorry and turned around and went back, disappeared. Boy, all of a sudden, here come the sirens and a bunch of cars and the lights flashing, everything right onto my station. I said, what the hell am I going to do now? I got 2 shots. And so all of a sudden they stopped. And here come the big man and the dog. And he got everybody around him. And he said, gentlemen, this is the way I want this airport secured. He said, I came up on the south end of this thing, and this young man called me a halt, and I wouldn't stop, and he cranked down on it, and I stopped. Because I was going to let him have it. And if he'd moved another 10 feet, I was going to blow him. I was under orders. but he was the current commanding officer of the field, he and his dog. But nothing like messing with the big guys. But anyway, I begged out of the MPs. I said, hell, I'm too small or too short for that. It's not my style of life. And several times I was on guard duty. In those days, the black troops were segregated from the whites. And my guard position was in that area. Now, you can't see those guys move, believe me, in the dark. And they were all over the place. But you got a tight pucker while you're down there. But they were okay. But then I was in the military, and I was in B-24 group, and I was worked my way up into pretty good positions. I flew all over the country with our crews. And when weather would come in, we would take our troops and we would go somewhere for training flights. We would train navigators and pilots. But I have an interesting story. You all have heard of Aaron Spelling, I'm sure. Aaron Spelling was a personal friend of mine. Aaron Spelling was 19 years old when I met him. And if you ever seen the comic strip Little Abner, you remember that rooster? Well, Aaron Spelling looked that emaciated rooster. He was kind of hunched over it. And if he was 2 inches in diameter, he was a big guy. But he's from the slums of Dallas. Well, anyway, Aaron was my clerk in base operations. And every time we went on a flight, he wanted to go. And we would take him. Or others would take him, He'd get the pass and go, because he loved to fly. But this one time, he wanted to go on this flight on a fellow by the name of Gillespie was a pilot. And he walked out, got on the manifest, and he was standing there bleary-eyed, nose running, and the flight surgeon was behind him. He said, son, you don't look like you feel very good. He said, no, I don't. He said, well, maybe you better not go on this flight. He said, oh, yes. He said, I got to go. I like to fly. He said, I'll be all right. He said, well, you'll probably lose both the hearing in both your ears if you go. So he thought a little bit about it, and then he went back to the barracks. So that afternoon then, late that afternoon, he went home, went to Dallas, caught the bus. And as he was getting down to where he lived, there was cars and people all over the place. And he walked in, and his mother saw him, and she ran up and grabbed him and hugged him and kissed him, and oh, so glad to see him, and so on and so forth. And he said, well, Mom, what's going on? What's this all about? Well, son, we thought you were dead. He said, well, no, I'm not dead. Why should I be dead? And then they told him the story. The crew that I knew every one of them personally took off and went to Chicago. And they stopped there to refuel. And on takeoff, they hit the depot, the fuel depot. They opened the big tanks and exploded, and everybody got killed. And his name was still on the manifest. They hadn't taken it off. And so that's my story about Aaron Spelling. Aaron was my clerk during World War II. But he had a bent for entertainment. Every chance he got to work with the people that were putting on programs and dancing and what have you, theater, why, he was there. But then later on, and of course you know the story, he moved, got wealthy and everything, became a director and what have you. But my military life was a good time in my life. got a good position, and but anyway, it's a high point in my life. And so Helen was expecting our second child, Janie, and oh, come on. So anyway, I made a comment. As much as I don't want to, I need to go back up to Perryville because I had a job waiting for me if I wanted it. I didn't want it, but then the job opportunities were not very good. So anyway, she blew her stack. She didn't want to go back to Perryville. I said, okay, no problem. So I put on my best pair of ODs and went downtown. And I thought, well, there's an employment agency here. I'll go by and see what's available. So I went to the employment agency, and a fellow by the name of Woodrow Wilson. Now, he was about 6 foot tall, very slender, handsome, little black mustache, and he's still living. He's down in Mississippi. I'll think his name of the place after a while. I've been down to see him. And he said, I don't know whether he'd be interested or not in this, but he reached in his drawer and pulled out a card. And on that card's name was Ben Vineyard, and he was a realtor. And he said, if I ever find somebody, that young person might be interested in real estate, to let him know he'd like to talk to him. So anyway, I made an appointment with him, and I went to work for him then in March of 1946. And that's how I got in the real estate business. And that's all I've been doing all my life. I've never had a salary job in my life. And in the factories, when I worked in the factories, we were on sort of what we called it a point system, but it was a compensation depending on how many units you worked at. Anyway, then we stayed here in Cape then, and I've been here ever since. And I went to work for him, and I worked for Mr. Vineyard for about 3 years. Then I opened my own company in 1950, and been in my own business ever since that time. During that time, well, of course, Mary Jean was my oldest daughter and Chris's mother. And so Helen and I have 7 children and a wonderful life.
What was your first conversation with Mr. Vineyard?
Pardon?
When you met Mr. Vineyard for the first time?
When I met Mr. Vineyard for the first time, and I was waiting for him, it was raining. And so here come a guy walking down the street with a cane, drizzling rain. And I was looking at him, I said, it couldn't be. And so he come by and he asked me if I was Tommy, and I said, yes. He said, I'm Ben Vineyard. I said, oh, okay, great, good to know you. So anyway, we went up there. There was a building on the corner of Broadway and Spanish called the Cahoon Building. No longer there, it's a flower garden there now. But went up to his office on the second floor, and he asked me one question. He said, well, what do you want to know? I said, I want to know everything. I want to know everything. And then we started talking, and then I decided, well, he said, what do you think? And I said, what the hell? And that's how I got in the real estate business. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And Ben was good to me. He was 72 years old. I said, this man ain't here for long. Well, anyway, I stayed with him, and he was a good friend. He taught me a lot of things, and he died then, I guess, at the age of about 80, because he was not a well man. But anyway, and here I'm almost 90, and he was an old man at 72. And but
What was one of the things he taught you?
pardon.
One of the things he taught you?
Well, first of all, the fundamentals, but like the paperwork and all. In those days, we had three pieces of paper we dealt with. That was the contract to purchase, contract to list the property, and a contract to sell, and a general warranty deed. Now we deal with hundreds of sheets of paper, and the that didn't take long. But then I said, well, how do you go about getting listings and stuff like that? He said, well, the best thing you can do is get out among people and talk what you're going to be doing. If you think you want to list their house, ask them if they want to sell their house, or find out who's going to do what. I said, well, how do I do that? I don't know anybody, and I didn't know anybody. He said, you'll learn to know people. Well, then I made up my mind on the second day in there, there's one way to do it. And so from that time until now, most every morning I would be somewhere for coffee. But in those days, I wouldn't be at the same place 2 days in a row. I would make my rounds. And every time I would go to a place, I would find something that in real estate. And really, I had to learn everything myself by doing. And but the academics or the mechanics rather, the paperwork and all, was easy to handle because Mr. Vineyard was an expert at it, so I learned a lot from him. I had two typewriters. One I had on this side of me was I kept my telephone calls on it. I'd make a name and telephone number, and I had a sheet in there. That was all I did on this typewriter over here. Then I'd do on my letter writing or what have you. But in fact, just yesterday, where in the heck was I? What was yesterday? Sunday, wasn't it? Okay, the Mass yesterday morning. I was walking out of the church, and this woman next to me, she said, 60 years ago you sold me my house, and I'm still there. I said, my God, I said, great, And so 60 years ago. But, and then not long ago, I had another woman that we was in a meeting, and she lives up on Scott Street. She said, that house you sold me on Scott Street 50 some odd years ago? She said, I'm still living there, and I still like it. I said, great. So, but it's selling houses is like selling apples. You got to find somebody who wants to buy apples, or you got to find somebody who wants to buy a house. It's that simple. So if you didn't want any apples, how am I going to sell you apples? So, but but I would, and of course I was young in those days, but not long ago, there's a fella came to the office. I watched him walking up Spring Street. I didn't pay much attention to him, but he come in the office. I went out the back door before he got there because I had to go somewhere. I didn't know he was coming in. And so he came in the office and he got a hold of Tom. And Tom asked him how did he pick us? How did he get our name or what have you? He said, 50 years ago when I was here, there was a young fellow by the name of Tom Meyer was running all over this town. I mean, he was a going and a going. And he said, I just wondered if, and I saw the name, so I thought I'd come by. He said, well, he's still here. But my point is that I was all over the place. Everybody knew me, but that's what you got to do is circulate and be with people. But in the work that I did, and then in the 1950s, 1953 and 55 then. I got an opportunity because of a good friend who was B.E. Montgomery, who was a fellow about no taller than, he wasn't even as tall as I am, but he was a freight agent or the manager of Frisco Railroad down here in Cape. And so he called me and he said, Tom, I need for you to come down to the station tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. You got some people that I want you to want to talk to. And so 6 o'clock I was down there. And there were two guys from St. Louis and two guys from somewhere else. And of course, they never did give me their true names at that time. But so B.E. introduced me to them. And B.E. said, whatever he tells you, that's what he'll do. So the first question was, can you keep a secret? I said, well, absolutely, because that's what this business is all about. He said, okay, all right, here's what we want you to do. And he outlined what they wanted me to do. They wanted to buy the land down by the airport. And it was 1,108 acres. And they said, we'd like for you to put the package together for us. Okay, so I went to work and I put that whole package together, 1,108 acres, for Armstrong Cork Company out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So that was the beginning. And then many years later, I had an opportunity again to put together a package of land, and the same question again, and the same MO. And that's when I brought Procter & Gamble to Cape. And I had 2 tracts of land. There was 1,100 acres in one and 1,300 acres in another area. And where they are now is 1,300 acres. So what I'm telling you, in 1950s then is when I started looking at commercial and industrial. So I did a lot of, I got away from, I still sold a lot of houses, but turned most of that over to my son and 2 of the others. And I did the, Sears and Kmart and Procter & Gamble and Armstrong Cork. And then most of the industries on the north side of Nash Road, I put all those in. And then we got that thing behind us. And then, of course, in 1957 then, or 58, I was traveling quite a bit and getting involved, and I bought an airplane. Took flying lessons, and so for the next 40 years, 58 to 95, whatever that is, 47 years, a bunch of years, I was flying all over the Midwest and then to Kansas City and places, Pittsburgh and all up through there, soliciting clients, trying to get customers to come in. And and it came in very handy. And although at the same time, in that period of time, I was very active in our state association, and I became president of the Realtors Association of the State of Missouri, and I was very active in that situation for many years. Organized the groups here in Cape, and the system, what you see today, started out with 9 people. When we started in the real estate business here, when we organized, there was 9 people was the beginning of the Real Estate Association here in Cape Girardeau. And 2 of them were from Jackson, and the rest of them are from here in Cape. And Mike McCrate, myself, John Craig, and John Pope Springer, and Gail Heisey, and I'm trying to think of one more, but anyway, we started out with 9. Now we've got about 500 licensees here in Cape, licensed to sell real estate. And if you look at the Sunday papers, you'll see pictures. It's a heck of a fine deal for the Missourian. I mean, but there's about 400 people that we got selling real estate. But anyway, I would leave here, and I remember one time I got a call. I traveled all over the United States. I'd hear of a client somewhere, and I would go. And one time I got home to pack, and Helen wasn't here. Nobody. But I packed up everything, and I had to go. And so I got into St. Louis and got on a flight. And that night I called her, and I said, Helen. She said, well, where are you? We're waiting supper. I said, well, honey, I'm in Boston. And she said, what are you doing in Boston? I said, well, you weren't home, and I had to go. And so anyway, but Boston, I worked the East Coast, then some California. We just about got one of the largest sporting goods manufacturers, but we didn't. But it's one that I missed. But Procter & Gamble is another one of my projects that I got, and I worked on it. That was in 1968. Started on it in 1965. But again, they came to me, and because, see, these organizations, their real estate people belong to a commercial group of all companies, manufacturing. And so when Procter & Gamble brought up, said, we want to move in the Cape Girardeau area, who do we see? So immediately somebody in the crowd said, go see me. And so they come and I put together the whole project up there. I did north and south of the park. I put together 1,300 acres for the site where they are now, and about 1,200 acres south of the park, Trail of Tears Park, as an option, potential site for them, which are one that they wanted to choose. But again, that was, nobody knew around here who they were or what I was doing, until one day I got a call from Cincinnati, and they said, can you be up here tomorrow morning? I said, sure, I can be up here tomorrow morning. And so I got a hold of Frisco, got a hold of their airplane, Frisco Rail people, and we flew to Cincinnati. By 10 o'clock, by 11 o'clock, we were on our way home, and I had the news release. They're going to build the plant in Cape Girardeau and where. So then but what I did, sometimes I get a little, have a little fun. And because, like I said, nobody knew what I was doing. And Alan Robinson, who was a chamber manager, he suspected something was going on, but I never told him anything. And so I said, Alan, you want to go to Cincinnati with me in the morning? He said, what for? I said, well, it's none of your damn business. I said, you want to go to Cincinnati with me? Yeah, well, sure, we'll go. So I said, be down at the airport at 7 o'clock. So, and Alan was a very personal friend of mine. He was a Chamber of Commerce manager, and he was industrially oriented. And we took off, got in the airplane. I said, well, now, Alan and Ray, I just want to tell you what we're going to do. Where I'm going to pick up the news release, and we're going to announce development of Procter & Gamble. I thought Alan Robinson was going to jump out of that airplane. Of course, this was a Frisco's Railroad's airplane, and it had a bar in it. So he got visiting the bar. Anyway, so on the way back then, and the next morning we had a big howdy-doody out at the Colonial Restaurant, made the announcement. We had all the news media there and everything. And so Procter & Gamble today, if you've ever been up there, you can see what it is. And they probably got about, I don't know how many employees now, but it's fabulous. And then some of the other businesses up there were mine too. But But then another time, we got a call. Oh, Obernester Glass Company was looking to expand. Oh no, Owens Glass Company, not Obernester. And so we flew to, I forgot now where they were. But anyway, we went up there and they came down here and showed them around, and they were willing to come here. And everything was going great. We had everything going our way. And so one day I come flying in from, I guess, Kansas City or where I was. I was by myself. And this is about 6 o'clock in the evening. And I saw Alan Robinson and Garland Fronebarger waiting for me at the airport. And I got out of my airplane and I said, "What are you guys doing down there?" He said, "Well, we want to come and tell you what happened." And we lost the glass company because we had an earthquake. Had a little earthquake, a tremor. Well, the reason was because they would have had like a water tower 150 feet in the air. And in it would have been nothing but molten glass. They would draw down, they were going to make windshields and glasses for cars. And they never did build that plant. If it would have come down and somebody would have been around and that hot glass would have killed somebody, it wasn't worth it. So that would happen there. And then another time we went to see another company up in New York somewhere. And we were flying to Twin Beach. So there's a lot of little funny things happen on occasion. And so we were in bad weather. We flew from New York City airport down to Albany. We stopped there, and we were on instruments all the time. The weather was bad. And so we had several people with us. And on takeoff, you have two selectors, you have three valves on your gas tank. You have two mains and one takeoff. And on your nose tank is what you use when you take off with a Twin Beach. So we were in this soup and we were flying, and all of a sudden everything shut down, and both of us dove for the valve. I went down to turn it on, and the pilot, he came down and wanted to turn it on. And of course everybody in the back come up, "What's going on up here?" No problem, but we just had to switch tanks, but we burned everything out of the nose tanks, so it got a little exciting. But then other times that when we were building at St. Francis, before we were building the St. Francis Hospital, we used to travel a lot, looking at other hospitals and all kinds of weather. And I'll never forget one time we were had been to Wheaton, and I don't know. No, it was up in New York somewhere. We looked at a hospital up there, and then we come back down, and so we were going to land at Omaha, which we did. But we were again on the instruments, which was bad weather, and I never was so glad to see these running lights as I was that night when we landed up there with bad weather. And everybody was all excited, couldn't see nothing, and it didn't bother us a bit because we had our instruments and we knew what we were doing. But they get a little excited on occasion. But the development of the Procter & Gamble situation opened up a lot of other opportunities around here for other industries, and the character of the people that we have here. See, in an industrial profile, there's three things that they look for. That's your political situation, your economic, and your cultural situation. Now, back in those days, we had a good political situation and still do. And economic, we're fantastic. But we didn't have the cultural like we got now. And cultural, I mean entertainment. Like we have the New Deal over by the old seminary. But it was still close enough that their people could go to St. Louis to see operas and what have you. So that became a big plus for us here, and so that was always a real good thing. Now, Cape Girardeau County is very strong because we have what we call agri-oriented labor, which means that we have a lot of people that work in the factories and go home and work on a farm. And those people are hard workers. And so that was a good thing for the area. From an economical standpoint, from the cultural standpoint, and from the nationality mix that we have, German and French and Spanish, and now we're getting some others in. But we have a good work ethic on that. And right now, we're working on, we got some projects going that are in the making, but hopefully they'll come through. Again, the economics are good for that. And if you'll notice that our community here, where we're on paper, we're about 35, 40,000 people. Yet our marketing sources, I mean the businesses that we have, you only find those in communities of 200,000 people or more. But see, what we have here is we have this area, 50, 60, 90 miles or whatever area out with all of these people that come to town. And we have the greatest medical facilities that you could have. And those are all drawing people into here. And I did an economic profile, and I did some studies back in the 60s and 70s. And I did some projections on what can happen and what will probably happen. And I have them at the office, but I was looking at them again today. And my projections on growth were pretty accurate from an economic standpoint. And then, of course, we have the interstate system, which made it much easier for people to come into shopping into our area and for medical help and what have you. So we're in an ideal situation. We're the last to go into a recession and the first to come out of a recession in our community here. And our business profile here is very good, very stable. And the nationality of the people that are here are just at the cause of it. And the thing is that I appreciate so much about it is that I saw a lot of these things happen. And because when I came here, there was only 18,000 people in town, and the city limits was West End Boulevard, about as far west as it got. And but we had an element of people here that didn't want to see the town grow. And here comes Mike McCrate and me. And we said, to hell with it. We got to live. We got to do these things. So we took advantage of those situations. Didn't know a darn thing. But you know what? We just bored in and did it. And we got the help that we needed. And fortunately, as I said earlier tonight, the GI loan program opened a lot of doors for me in the industrial and commercial field. And because I got to know people outside of the limits, and I had no problem in going to those people. And I learned a long time ago, if you don't ask a question, you're not going to learn anything. And the other thing is, that person wanted to be asked to begin with. So, and even today, I've got things that I've written and profiles that I've developed and ideas that I work on. And but anyway, that's just what happened here. That's what made the town grow. I was involved in the Florsheim Shoe Company when it expanded in that. So, and I had the key ground to it. And so, but, and we opened a lot of the markets. We're now, my expertise in the field of industrial work, I dealt a lot in Germany and in England. But now we're working, Tom's got real good connections in Japan and New Zealand. And so New Zealand people are buying land in southeast Missouri. And the Japanese people are in Perryville. And every week we get, Tom's in touch with, he's been over to Japan a couple of times. And so Cape Girardeau is the center of it, but the whole world out there is open to you now at the flip of a switch. Yeah, you guys with your computers, you can buzz anybody. My computer was a hand crank adding machine, the first one I had, never forget. How I got it. Red Weezer had a typewriter shop here in town. He had an office on Broadway, just to give you an idea what we go through sometimes. I walked into his store. I needed an adding machine. This was 1956, thereabouts, 1955. And so he was right down the street, so I thought, well, heck, I think I could afford one. So I went down there, walked in, and he was working on a Yamaha motorcycle. I said, what are you doing there, Red? He said, well, I'm putting a motorcycle. He had a couple of them in the window for sale. And so anyway, I said, well, what you need is a building. If you're going to do that, this building's not big enough. I got one out here on the highway. He said, I don't have any money. I said, well, the guy that owns the building don't have any money either. And I said, you need a building. And he needs to get rid of the building. And I need an adding machine. And I might need a motorcycle. So I took him out and showed him the building. Glenn Sporkman had the building, had a body shop in it. And so I made a deal for $20,000. I sold him that building. No money down, didn't have any money, but we made a deal. And I got a motorcycle and a adding machine for my commission. And so then later on, they built another big building, and I did all that work for them. But you never know what you get into when you got to be innovative. That's like punching a key on a computer deal that you don't know what's going to happen. All of a sudden, something popped up. Wow, great, we'll use it. And so the hand-cranked adding machine, noisy as all Billy hell. But then we got one that had to run by electricity. If you ever had a racket in your life, that was it. Go crank, so anyway, the crazy deals. One time I was at breakfast. It was about, again, in the 50s. I was at the restaurant out there, and Bill Hollenbeck was sitting there on a bar stool drinking coffee, and I sat down next to him. And I said, Bill, I got a building you need. He said, damn, I don't need a building. I said, yes, you do. I said, you're working on the street over there, and the guys are scrubbing everything out on the sidewalk. I said, I got a building. He said, well, all right, let's go take a look at it. So I took him down and showed him the building and traded him into a building. And that's how we used to work. And he found out he needed a building, old Bill Hollenbeck. And so, and like again, like in those days, we didn't have a lot of money, but we had the ability to trade. I remember one time, I forget how it was, really came about, but a guy had a house out on Bend Road, and we were always swapping things back and forth. And so I sold him the house, and he said, "By golly, we've been swapping back and forth. I want to hear that. How much you give me for my pistol? As I'll give you $40 credit on the down payment." And so stuff like that, sometimes a lot of fun. You know, you can make your job fun or you can make it tough. And but if you got to love what you're doing. And like I've said on occasion, I had three loves in my life. And one is my mother and father and my family, and my wife and my family, and my business. And I was totally in love with all three. And because if you don't like what you're doing, you're not going to do well. You're just going to, but you got to have fun in what you're doing. And you got to be innovative. Even if it's learning how to carry it another way to make it easier, walking down the street. There's a motto I have: know everything you can about what you don't know. Know all you can about what you don't know. And all that is, you know that machine, but you don't know it all. So you need to know more about it, what you don't know. You got to imagine, what else can this thing do? What is its capabilities? The greatest inventions in the world were by accident, by guys who punched a button or had an idea. It's like an idea one time we had: how can we lift this hay in this barn a lot easier? We just rigged another set of pulleys. But if you don't like what you're doing, find something what you love to do. Then you'll be happy, and you'll make a deal. There was one other thing. I tell you what, because of my illnesses that I've had, it made me mad. Because I just wasn't supposed to, it just wasn't right for me to be sick. And I think I got well in spite of a lot of them. I just recently went through another serious situation. I got it was a year ago, wasn't it? And that was it's about maybe two. Well, anyways, a couple of years ago. But Chris took me to the hospital. And because I thought I was having a heart attack. And they, on the 15th of January. And so they checked me in, and they couldn't find anything. So they checked me out. And then on the 30th, I believe it was, 15 days later, I was back in there with gangrene, peritonitis, and pancreatic cancer. Not cancer, but I had everything was wrong. And I was almost down for the count. But I tell you, twice in my lifetime, in 1948, I was laying in St. Francis Hospital in the hallway because they had no room, with a burst appendix and gangrene and peritonitis. And I knew I was sick. And I was laying there, and I made my peace with God. Priest came by, and I laid there and I said, God, if you're going to take me, you got to take care of my wife and my two babies. I'd resigned myself to what it is, and I said, you got to do it. I was operated on, and again, I told the story about how all along I was this and that. But I had made my peace. I did the same thing on a Sunday morning in January a year ago. I knew I was that close to going, because I had pneumonia and I had all that infection. And all of a sudden the buzzers went off and everything, but I was at peace with myself and resigned to, okay, this is it, this is it. And I wasn't anguished about it or anything. It was just, and so be it. But all of a sudden, like the voice said to me, "Are you ready?" I said, "Well, really, no."